Today we're going to be painting some scenery from the Necromunda Underhive box set. The Barricades and Bulkheads are all metallic, so all the techniques that are used here can be used across the entire range. So we're going to be painting this bulkhead, and that's going to give us all the techniques we need for doing all of the scenery. There's some great detail on these pieces, and it's quite fun to paint. So the first thing you want to do is undercoat it black. I use my airbrush. You can use a rattle can or just a paintbrush if you haven't got them. And we're going to paint this whole thing metallic straight away. So using lead belcher, it's a really dark metal paint, and that's going to be our base coat. So just going to get some on the brush, put it on the palette, and just really work it into the bristles. I'm using quite a big brush for this one because I'm just going to cover as much area as I can. So just working it in. And then we're just going to cover the whole model there. So I've painted both the sides of the bulkhead, and I've also done the edges as well. So with it dried, we're ready to move on to the next step, which will be breaking up the flat silver. And we're going to be doing that by picking out some details, like the doors and the pipes as well, using Balthasar gold. This will give me some nice copper detailing. So with the Balthasar gold, just picking out the details that we want to have is copper or bronze, and with a thin down paint just go over and using a thin brush just for the detail, and so we don't spill over onto the silver where we don't want it. So I'm hitting parts of the door, like the trim of it, the hinges, and also the pipes here. This is just going to break up the flat colouring, just making it look a bit more interesting. And with the Balthasar gold applied, it really helps break up the flat silver on the piece as well. So I've just went in, I've done all the pipes, different parts of the bulkhead. Again, just breaks the colour up. And gives me some options for weathering later as well. So next, we're going to be applying some shade, and for that, we'll be using Null Oil. So we're just going to apply the Null Oil using a big brush just to do it for quickness. And we're going to be covering the whole model with it. Just making sure you get it into all the detail, really bringing out the shadows on it. Just move the Null Oil around so you can avoid having big pools of it, just covering bits, because when that dries it'll be really dark and it'll just look weird. And making sure you get into the details like the keypad and the servo skull on the side there. And like I say, just keep moving it so it doesn't pool where you don't want it to. And with Null Oil on both sides dried, we're ready to move on to the next shade, which is a Grox'lar Shade. So just as we did with the Null Oil, we're going to apply this across the whole model, and it's going to help really dirty up the bulkhead. So just getting it on, working it into the details, and just keep it moving so it doesn't pool in places where you don't want it to. And do this on both sides as well. With the Grox'lar Shade fully dried, we're ready to move on to the next step, which will be a little bit of dry brush highlighting. So using a light silver, I'm using chainmail, we'll just be dry brushing it on. So using a brush, just get some onto the bristles and then really work it in. You don't want to have too much on your brush, otherwise it'll just mess it up. So just on the palette, just working it in. And then using the very tips of the brush, just dragging down, and we're going to be hitting the top of all the raised bits of detail. So very gently with it. And you don't want to be doing any up brush strokes, it's just all down, otherwise the highlighting doesn't really look right. So with the dry brush dried, we'll then be moving on to some sections that aren't metallic. And for that we'll be using white paint. And with the white, I'm going to be looking at things like the lens on the servo skull, the keypad, and the light bulb as well. So I've thinned the white paint down quite a bit, so we'll be using a few layers to build it up, because there's some nice detail on these bits, like on the servo skull lens, that we don't want to absolutely cover up. So just using the edge of the brush, just hitting those little bits there. And with the light bulb, you want to be painting into the centre of it as well, because with the thin down paint, when you brush along it and you take your brush away, it leaves a little blob of paint which will be a bit thicker than the rest of it. So we're going to use that for the light intensity on the light. Okay, we're just going to do all the little light panels on here. So on this bulkhead here, I've painted the lights on both sides, and we've got some little dials on the pipe work here as well. And then there's the keypad, the servo skull lens as well. Next stage, we're going to add some rust. So using a thin brush and rat brown, any reddy brown will work for this. You want to thin it right down, because we're going to be applying a few layers just to really steadily build up the rust effect. So you're just looking for places where water would be like staying on it, where it would be running down it, and we're just going to weather it up with that. Like I say, it's quite thin down, so we're going to be looking at doing 2, maybe 3 coats as well. just depending on how deep you want the rust to be. With the rust applied, we're then going to be looking at weathering the brass and copper colour as well. And for that, we are using Necromunda oxide, which is one of Citadel's technical paints. And this is great for adding the verdigris and the patina onto your bronze and brass and copper. So I'm just going to get some on the brush, put it onto the palette. It'll just give us a little bit more control over how much I'm using when it's on the palette. And then just like we did with the rust, we're looking at where the water will have been on the brass and bronze. And we're just going to use a mixture of brush strokes and dabbing, and that's going to help give a little bit of texture to it and give more of a natural look to it. Then with the weathering done, we're going to add some artificial lighting. Now this is completely optional, this step. It's a bit more of an advanced technique, but feel free to follow along if you want to add a bit more lighting onto it as well. So using thin down white paint, really thin, you're going to build up layers just where the light's going to be shining out from this bulb. So just using a thin brush, just a little bit on the brush there. So that was a bit too thick. So just thin it down a bit more. And then just dragging towards the light. It looks a lot stronger on this video here just because of the lamp that I've got shining on it. In person it's a bit fainter. So you just want to be dragging that paint towards the light source. Now with the light source done there, we're going to use thin down Mephiston red, and we're just going to cover up what we've painted white there, and this is going to give you a nice gradient for the light. Now you can use any colour you want. I'm just using red for this example. The technique's going to be the same. And you just want to do a couple layers, just steadily building it up, moving closer towards the light source each time. Then with the light done on both sides of the bulkhead, we'll then be looking at doing the lens of the servo skull. Let's get a better focus here. So to do that, we'll be using Mephiston red again, just like we did for the light. And just using the side of the brush, just dab a little bit onto the lens. Now this one's quite thin, so I end up doing a couple of layers on this. And once that's ready, we then take just a little bit of Nuln Oil. We don't need much since it's just going to be dabbed on there. Just a little bit on the edge of the brush. And then just putting that onto the lens. From there we use blood red, and at the bottom left of the lens we just do a little crescent shape, and then on the opposite side, the top right, just a little dab of white. And that completes the lens and the bulkhead.